Over here, stranger.
What's going on, guys, gals, and kids of all ages? It's Eric coming back at you from the Nerd Cave, and today we are looking at my unbiased opinion on the Resident Evil 4 remake. Well, I think it's safe to say unbiased may not be the right description for my opinion of the Resident Evil franchise. I'm a bit of a fan. If you haven't been tuned into the channel for a while, this may be new information to you, but I love Resident Evil, and I just finished playing through Resident Evil 4 for the 6th time with this new remake, 7th time? Jeez, I don't even know. I couldn't show my copy of Resident Evil 4 on the Oculus. I guess I could have just held my Oculus up. Played through this game a ton of times, and I want to share my thoughts on this most recent version. So one of the things I liked most about this game is the fact that they did take the time to flesh out the backstory of some of our favorite characters from the original, like Luis. He has much more backstory. I don't want to give anything away, but let's just say he's in more of the game, so you get to enjoy him a little bit longer, and he is much more fleshed out as opposed to a kind of one-dimensional character. One of the other characters we see fleshed out in this game is going to be Mendez, who is actually the mayor of the town, I believe, and then like everybody there, he does get kind of taken over by Las Plagas. He becomes one of your primary enemies throughout the game. This is not spoilers, this is the same as the original Resident Evil 4. Everything we're going to be looking at today is going to stay pretty much spoiler free as long as you have played the original Resident Evil 4. I'm not going to talk about boss fights or any specific plot details, but I am going to talk a little bit about how things may vary from the original without going into spoiler territory. We also saw a great update to the Krauser character, and this is where I am going to talk a little bit to changes in backstory, but again, it's not going to hurt anything. Obviously, when the original Resident Evil 4 came out, it was a game for the GameCube, and it was prior to Resident Evil The Dark Side Chronicles, which was a Wii exclusive game. This is a shooter. This actually has a pretty awesome add-on where you can get like a knife and a Magnum gun for your Wiimote to go into. It's very cool. Anyway, this game did add some backstory around what kind of happened in between the events of Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4 that led to Leon having some of this special training and all that kind of stuff that you see him employing in Resident Evil 4 instead of being a rookie cop like you see him as in Resident Evil 2. That all kind of takes place during the events of the Dark Side Chronicles, and it does take place under the direction of Krauser. So that is giving them some backstory, and they do directly allude to this backstory in Resident Evil 4 because, like I said, the events of this game do take place prior to Resident Evil 4, so it's really cool seeing them kind of flesh that out more and talk about the events of this game. So if you haven't played this game and you want to get the most out of playing the Resident Evil 4 remake, definitely check this out first. It is a Wii exclusive. One of my other favorite new additions is the fact that they made Ashley far less annoying to just like generally have around. She's no longer able to be kind of left behind and does have to stay with you, but you can choose if you want her kind of right with you or with a little bit of distance. But just the mechanics of her moving around, the way that she talks, the dialogue, all that kind of stuff is vastly improved from the original Resident Evil 4. Speaking of things that I think are vastly improved, the original Resident Evil 4, 5, 6 were kind of more action oriented. They weren't as much horror focused. That had a lot to do with the fact that after Resident Evil 3 came out, they did do a remake of Resident Evil 1, and at that time it wasn't received particularly well. Resident Evil 0 didn't do the best either, and because of those two games not doing the best, Capcom thought it was time to pivot the franchise. There was a lot of action-oriented shooting games coming out. They did make Resident Evil 4 and subsequently 5, which we all know how that went, a lot more action-oriented, and even 6 pretty action heavy, and then 7 they kind of went back to their horror roots. So we're seeing that inspiration in 7 and 8 and people loving those games coming back to rear its head in Resident Evil 4, and I think it's a fantastic thing. The more horror centric beats is really enjoyable when playing through the game. And they did even add things like stealth mechanics, so you can kind of sneak up on people, jab them with your knife. Really breaks up the way that the game is played overall, and it's not just action the whole way through. Speaking of one of the more action-centric areas of the game, though, there is the area where you are inside of the castle. The castle is much more fleshed out. It is a much bigger castle than we saw in the original. Kind of makes sense, bigger game, bigger castle, but it does feel a lot more like a castle, and it does contain some crazy battles, and including one that we all know and love. Maybe not love, but we all know from the original, the battle with the Garnador. One of my least favorite enemies in the game, although it did break up the battling mechanic when they came into play, was the kind of Las Plagas spider enemies. They really make you deal with them first, and if you don't, it's just going to make the whole battle that much harder for you. So if you see the spiders, definitely take them out first. I do think they made Ramon Salazar much creepier and cooler, so that was something I really enjoyed change-wise. In the original, he kind of almost looked like a little kid. He is supposed to be an adult man who's just small, kind of a Napoleon thing going on. It did make him look much more adult in this one, and it just makes him all that much creepier. So they did a great job with him. They also gave him a family instead of making him an orphan like in the original, so the way that that kind of backstory in his storyline is flushed out and gives him more backstory and more kind of tie-in to everything that's going on really is quite interesting. Obviously the graphics are amazing. It's a huge overhaul. The original game came out on GameCube, so clearly they're going to do something significantly fancier on a new console, and that was great. But one thing I continue to struggle with the RE engine, I felt the same way about Resident Evil 8, is just that their water effects feel outdated. Like, it doesn't feel, and it's not so much the water itself, it's the effects, like the splashes, that kind of stuff. Feels like something almost from last generation, which just feels really out of place with everything else looking so fresh and new. I will say, they said the average playthrough for this game is about 16 hours, where if you just want to do the critical plot beats, you can beat the game in about 12 hours. It did take me just over 20 hours to finish the game. I did try to focus on doing a lot of the extra stuff, and even going so far as to backtrack to do optional missions, so that may have definitely slowed me down. But overall, I'm happy with an extra 4 hours to take on a lot of the optional stuff.
I don't believe it. You went and did them all. Guess everyone needs a hobby.
Compared to the average playthrough, I did end up with a B ranking on my playthrough, but I'm still pretty happy with that. I think I died like 35 times, which is actually a lot more than I died in Resident Evil 8. I do feel like compared to the original, since it is designed to be less action oriented, they did a great job limiting you on the amount of resources you had, and I think that did lead to me trying to save things and dying a little bit more because of it, getting hit a little bit more because of it. But in avoiding getting hit, they did add the ability to parry with the knife, which is really cool. You can even go so far as to parry the Chainsaw Man's attacks, so it really adds a different way to approach those battles, whereas in the original Resident Evil 4, if you got a chainsaw swung at you, you could get your damn head cut off. In this Resident Evil 4, you can actually catch it with the knife, you can kind of push him back, kick him. It really adds a different variance to how to battle him and how to battle one of the new enemies that they did add that's similar to the Chainsaw Man that I will not spoil. And last but certainly not least, one of my favorite new additions to the Resident Evil 4 remake is a new gun called the Bolt Thrower. The Bolt Thrower is a fantastic addition to the new game. Basically, it is a reclaimable bolt, so it kind of works like a crossbow or something, kind of the appeal of the zombie apocalypse, Walking Dead. I don't know if that's why they did it, but you can shoot the bolts and then you can reclaim the bolts, so it really saves you on your ammunition. With that being more scarce in this game, that becomes incredibly important. I actually used the bolt thrower quite a bit and still found myself in battles where I was fairly low in things like my shotgun and some of my other larger weapons that were good at taking out some of the bigger, tougher enemies. Overall, I would say the game was pretty fantastic. I'm looking forward to playing it through again. I do not know if I want to up the difficulty. I may play it through on standard again first. Like I said, I did die quite a bit as it is. I did get better at it over time, but overall, the game is fantastic. They did a great job. They really paid homage to the original Resident Evil 4 instead of like with Resident Evil 3. People didn't like that they changed some of the major story beats. They didn't change so much in this game, but they did flush a lot of things out. So they really paid a lot of respect to the source material while just making everything that much better. So I highly recommend you check out the Resident Evil 4 remake, and if you want to talk to me about it in the comments below, if you think maybe they'll make a Resident Evil 5 remake and even tone down the action in that, I personally would love that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the comments. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're enjoying the videos a lot, and thank you so much for sticking around to the end. You guys' support recently means the world to me. We're up to about 350 subscribers. When we hit 500, I'm planning on doing another big giveaway. If anybody entered the seal giveaway from a couple of videos ago, nobody did guess it correctly. It was 122 seals, but I think the closest person was like 117, so I'll be following up to them with them to at least give them something small. I still want to follow through with the giveaway even though nobody got it right. I want to give somebody something, so stick around, subscribe, help us get to 500 subscribers so I can give away more awesome games to the audience. And as always, when you see those toys and video games off in the distance, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day. See you soon.